What's up, y'all? Every Monday morning, I lock myself into the utilization bunker until I come away with the most actionable takeaways you need to dominate your fantasy league. Today, we've got 4 new players to dive into. We're going to start off with Kenneth Walker. So the Seahawks spent a second-round draft pick on Kenneth Walker, despite already having Rashad Penny on the roster. However, the early returns from the talent profile look really good for Kenneth Walker. He is double the NFL average in missed tackles forced, and he's also had a really good targets per route run at 23%. If you look at the last 3 years of NFL data, running back ones in fantasy football and PPR leagues have averaged a 20% targets per route run. And so that is something that we didn't necessarily expect. He didn't catch a lot of balls in college, and that opens up a lot of doors for Kenneth Walker as we move forward. So let's take a look at Kenneth Walker's utilization profile. So last week, after we saw Rashad Penny go down, it was all Kenneth Walker. 88% of the snaps, 100% of the rushing attempts, and oh yeah, they had him on the field in passing downs. He didn't get everything. We actually did see DJ Dallas get 2 out of 3 snaps in that scenario. But it's interesting that over the last several games, we've seen the Seahawks staff working him onto the field in obvious passing downs when they know he could be facing a blitz from the opposing defense, and they're trusting him. What does that mean? Why is that important, Dwayne? Because it's the hardest role for a rookie running back to take over, is to earn the trust of the quarterback, to earn the trust of the offensive staff, to not get the quarterback killed. And once you've opened that door, everything else becomes available. So while we may think that the Seahawks are going to use a blend of backs and somehow spell Kenneth Walker on passing downs, and I think that's how it will start, there's a definite opportunity here for Kenneth Walker to turn into an every down back and a really great offense. So let's break down the Seahawks offense. So there's 3 things that you need to know about the Seahawks offense that are just going to keep you super hyped about Kenneth Walker. And the first thing is the fact that Geno Smith is the #1 passer according to PFF. The second thing, 28% of their drives are ending in touchdowns. That's the 6th best in the NFL. And finally, they also have pace. On average, they are snapping the ball with 11 seconds left on the play clock. That is also the 6th most in the NFL. So we have an offense with a good quarterback. They're scoring points. You've got the weapons with Lockett and Metcalf to help sustain that. And oh, by the way, they can run a lot of plays. What does that all channel back to? Opportunities down inside the 5 for who? For Kenneth Walker to punch it into the end zone. So when we think about Walker, folks, he's an absolute buy. If he's on your waiver wire, look, he's out there about half the time. You're going to go get him, but don't be afraid to go buy high. If you're hitting up, the other manager in your league that has Kenneth Walker, remember, we rarely get a case where the talent profile, the utilization profile, and then the team environment all line up. You might get this once or twice a year. So he is a player that we really want to go after. In fact, I've already moved him into the high RB2 range for the rest of my season rankings, and we could very easily be talking about a player that is in the mid RB1 range by next week. So if you can, go get him before we see another game and he completely explodes. So let's talk about another rookie running back in Rashad White in Tampa Bay. This is the guy that could be the next rookie running back to completely explode, that everyone wants to get all their waiver wire chips on, but you can do it ahead of time. Right now, he's available in 66% of Yahoo leagues, and if he's not, he's still a guy that's nice to go buy low. Let's start with the talent. #1, this is a back that was really good as a receiver coming out in college. In fact, he was the best in this class. He had a 16% target share his senior year at Arizona State, and now he lands in an offense with Tom Brady that likes to throw the ball a lot. Well, how does he look early in the season? Really good. A 21% targets per route run, despite not being out on the field that much. So those are the sort of things that we want to look for, right? Guys that as their role grows, could they have the opportunity to do more? And remember, when we talked about Kenneth Walker, an RB1 in fantasy football has a targets per route run of 20%. So we've already got Rashad White above that number. So let's talk about, what does the utilization look like in Tampa Bay? Rashad White's role has been expanding over the last 2 weeks. In fact, like if you just wanted to keep it simple, he's Tony Pollard already. What would you do if Tony Pollard was dropped and put on the waiver wire? Like, he's not out there very often. Most likely you would drop whatever you're doing right now and you would go get him. That's the same way you need to be thinking about Rashad Penny. His snap share over the last 2 games, 40%. He's handled 32% of the rushing attempts, and he's been in a route 37% of the time that Tom Brady is dropping back to pass. This is a player that early on in the season wasn't getting any work hardly at all, and now the coaching staff has decided they don't want to keep Leonard Fournette on the field all the time. And so he's going to have some standalone value on this utilization alone, especially when bye weeks get here. But obviously the contingency value is where it really gets crazy for him because he plays for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. And let's talk about that. The Buccaneers plays are on an upswing. We've now got them healthy with Chris Godwin back. You get Mike Evans back from suspension. 67 plays per game over the last 2 weeks. Early on in the season, a little bit lethargic. We're running the ball more, all of those things. All of this stuff really comes back to the fact that Rashad White is really good at what? He's really good as a receiver out of the backfield. Now, he hasn't fully taken over that kind of role yet, but the fact that they trust him out there in long down and distance, they trust him out there in the 2-minute offense, tells us that if something happens to Leonard Fournette with the way that this offense is stylistically set up to throw the ball, it's going to be a really good thing. The Bucs don't care if they're leading. The Bucs don't care if the game is tied. The Bucs don't care if they're trailing. They throw the ball above the NFL average in every single one of those scenarios, and that makes Rashad White a perfect fit for this offense. And he's a guy that he's an RB4 with upside already, but he has RB1 overall potential if something does happen to Leonard Fournette. So enjoy him. You can use him in the bye weeks. You know, he can go into your flex if you need him occasionally. But if something happens and we get games without Leonard Fournette, you're going to have someone almost every ranker in fantasy football is going to have inside their top 12. So we've talked about a couple of rookies. Now let's talk about a veteran. We've got to go to Miami. Let's look at Raheem Mostert. He's averaging 9.1 fantasy points per game. I know, not that impressive, but I think there's an opportunity for that number to really go up when we look at, number one, his talent. He's an explosive playmaker. Mike McDaniel knew this whenever he went after him in free agency. 16% of his carries have gone for 10-plus yards over the last 3 seasons. The NFL average is 11.5%. So in an offense where you've got Jalen Waddle, you've got Tyreek Hill running all over the place, opening things up, and now you have a guy like this that can gash a defense and hit these big plays. The talent profile is there. You can ignore the age on Raheem Mostert. Like, he does not have all the work, the wear and tear. Yeah, he's been injury prone in the past. We'll deal with that when we get there because guess what? He has a huge opportunity in front of him. Let's look at his utilization. So Mostert has completely taken over the Dolphins' backfield. Chase Edmonds, nowhere to be found. Got a lot of money, nowhere to be found. 71% of the snaps over the last 2 games have gone to Mostert, 69% of the rushing attempts, and 61% route participation. That is nearly elite. 65% is that threshold when you get to it. It's like, oh my God, this running back's really involved in the passing game. So he's almost to that. And guess what? I don't think it's going away. You know why? 93% of the 2-minute offensive snaps have gone to Raheem Mostert in the last 2 games. That is the number one thing that you want to go to if you want to know if a guy's truly going to be involved in the passing game. 20% of NFL targets come in the few 2-minute offensive plays that we see in the league every year. It's like this thing that hugely outweighs the other because defenses go into shell coverage. It's Raheem Mostert. He's the one that's out there. Chase Edmonds has not played well. In fact, he's being challenged by Myles Gaskin, so it looks like this is going to be here to stay. So let's talk about what does the Miami offense look like, and can it support Raheem Mostert from a fantasy perspective? We need the starting quarterbacks back, folks. Like, that's the bottom line. Like, this offense, even though it hasn't really had a starting quarterback over the last 2 games, still ranks 8th in the NFL in the percentage of drives that are ending in touchdowns, 26%. Now, that is living off of the first couple of games. But the bottom line is we've seen it happen. So once we get Tua back, once we get Teddy Bridgewater back, one of those two, it's going to be a situation where it's only going to get better. It could be a little bit rough. I'm not going to lie to you. It could be a little bit rough if we've got to see another game with Skylar Thompson. He was fine, but he's a 7th-round rookie, and that may make them want to lean on Raheem Mostert in the running game more. But really what we want from this offense is for it to be clicking in the passing game, for defenses to be so worried about everything else that it's opening up these huge lanes for Mostert to run through. Mostert's not a guy that I think we necessarily want to see him get 30 carries. We'll take it, but I would worry about him breaking down. What we want from him is a 20, 22 touch game, but 1 to 2 really big chunk plays. Hopefully one of those going for a touchdown, gets the carries inside the 5. So at the end, we've got a strong profile, not great. Want to make sure you folks don't go crazy to go get Raheem Mostert, but he is a player that I believe you can buy low on. He did score 19 fantasy points last week. But there's a good chance that the league managers in your league, they don't watch this, number one. And number two, they don't know how much his utilization profile has changed over the last 2 weeks. So he's definitely a running back that if you need help at your RB2, you should go kick the tires on. So we've talked about running backs so far. Let's give a receiver some love. And we will go back to the rookie well here with Alec Pierce of the Indianapolis Colts. This is a situation where we haven't seen him on the field much, but guess what? When he's out there, it has been really good. And what is the data point that we want to look at for a situation like this? You guys know it's targets per route run. Over the last 3 games, 25%, 35%, and 25%. If we go back and we look at data for fantasy football over the last 5 years, what does a wide receiver one look like from a targets per route run standpoint? 25%. So we are right there with Alec Pierce, a guy that a lot of people aren't really talking about. And so he's a guy that when we look at the utilization, it has been challenging. He has only been out there for 40% of the routes, then 47% of the routes. But this last week, we saw him get to 73%, which was a season high. And guess what? Paris Campbell has really been leading the way as the wide receiver 2, and he's done nothing. He's got a 7% target per route run, despite being out there almost all the time. And so I think this is a situation where over the next couple of games, we're just going to see Alec Pierce overtake Paris Campbell. And once he gets to a 90 and 95% route rate, it's really just him and Michael Pittman, and that's going to give him an opportunity to really move out of where I've got him now as a high-end wide receiver 4 to looking more like a wide receiver 3. I know what you guys are saying. You're worried about the Colts offense. Here's the thing. I'm worried too. They're not scoring a lot of touchdowns, but guess what? They have a lot of volume because they're trailing. Right now, they've got the 11th most dropbacks in regulation play in the NFL. Not something we thought we would be saying about the Colts. So while we may not get the quality with the touchdowns, we are getting a situation where they're having to throw the ball more. That enables an opportunity to support 2 weapons. That means Michael Pittman can thrive. That means we can also get Alec Pierce thriving. And the other thing is, if the Colts suddenly start to play better or able to get Jonathan Taylor a little bit more incorporated, you can probably offset some of those passing attempts that we're going to lose to having the opportunity to score more touchdowns, because Pierce is a guy with a big frame. He does 2 things really well. He can get downfield. He can also be a target inside the red zone, in the end zone, and those are outs. We want to roster players that give us outs, that have a lot of talent, and Pierce is showing a lot for being a player as young as he is. He might be the next guy to really flash up and be the George Pickens. We've already talked about Garrett Wilson this season. We've already talked about Drake London. Like, this guy's really surprising me with what he's been able to do. He's available in over 90% of Yahoo leagues right now. So if you can get him still, that's great. If not, he's certainly a buy low.